Hello and welcome to the Atlas Agency, a channel all about Arkham Horror the card game by Fantasy Flight Games. I'm your host Brandon, and today I'm very excited to kick off a brand new investigation into Arkham's second expansion cycle, the Path to Carcosa. As I record this in late August, most of us, myself included, are still waiting patiently for the Path to Carcosa Deluxe box to hit retail. It looks like it should be soon. Some fortunate Arkham fans were able to get early copies of this at Gen Con, but I was not among them, sadly. So in the meantime, while I wait, I thought I would do a video just to sort of introduce this new cycle. I'll be covering a couple of things here. First, I'll talk about some format changes that you'll notice for the Atlas Agency's upcoming Path to Carcosa videos. Second, I'll talk briefly about the fiction that serves as the background and inspiration for this cycle, and touch on how it's been used in previous Arkham Files games. I'll run through a short list of Carcosa-related reading and listing recommendations, and finally I'll end by talking about just a few player cards from this cycle that have been officially spoiled by Fantasy Flight that I'm most excited to get my hands on. Alright, let's dive in. Before we get into the Carcosa stuff, I wanted to make a quick mention of some format changes you'll see in the Atlas Agency videos. I already talked about this at the end of the Lost in Time and Space video, so I don't want to beat it to death, but for my Dunwich videos, I was doing one video per expansion and covering both the player cards and the scenario content in the same video. For Path to Carcosa, I'm going to begin separating the player card rundowns and the scenario reviews into separate videos. For each scenario, I'll be doing a spoiler-free first impressions video, as well as a later, more detailed look that discusses the scenario without avoiding spoilers. I think these will be nice changes that help me do content a little more frequently, and I'm also looking forward to having a space where I don't have to dance around the scenario spoilers. Okay, enough meta talk, let's get on to the introduction of the Path to Carcosa cycle. I think the way I'll start here is just by reading you the opening of Fantasy Flight's initial Path to Carcosa announcement article. It begins. A new theater production is coming to Arkham, all the way from Paris. Unsurprisingly, it's been all the rage in conversations among Arkham's socialites. But, in your efforts to learn more about the play, you've uncovered a darker history. Disappearances, suicides, delusions, insanity. Wherever The King in Yellow is performed, madness follows close behind. Everything you find suggests the workings of something foul, even though no connection has yet been proven. In the Path to Carcosa, it becomes your task to uncover the secrets of this unusual play. So we have as the focus of our investigation this cycle, The King in Yellow, a theatrical production whose mere presence threatens madness and disaster. This evil play has had a pretty good run in Paris, and now it's set its sights on our beloved, peaceful little city of Arkham for its next run. This play that drives people mad, The King in Yellow, isn't original to the Arkham Horror game. If you've not encountered it elsewhere, it is a well-established piece of the larger Cthulhu mythos. Its origins actually go all the way back to an 1895 short story collection by author Robert W. Chambers by that same name, The King in Yellow. There it appears as a recurring motif in several different stories that feature characters who have been driven to madness by reading this play. In Chambers, we never see the full text of the play, only fragments, but the fragments that we do see are very evocative and mysterious. From the Chambers stories, we also get this otherworldly city of Carcosa, which is featured on that great piece of cover art on the Path to Carcosa box. Much later on, through other authors, these elements of Chambers' stories were drawn into the Cthulhu mythos, and Hastur, a name which is mentioned only in passing in Chambers' stories, was developed into a great old one in the Lovecraftian pantheon. It looks like the lore of Hastur and the King in Yellow may have been further evolved by the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game to arrive at the type of portrayal that we see in the Arkham Files games. Back in the Arkham LCG core set, there was a series of 4 encounter sets where each set represented the influence of one of 4 well-known Ancient Ones being the cosmic entities from the Lovecraft mythos that serve as the big bads in the different Arkham Files games. The game's first expansion cycle, the Dunwich Legacy, was a story focused on Yog-Sothoth, an Ancient One represented in one of those 4 encounter sets. It started to look then as though those 4 encounter sets might possibly be the roadmap to the early expansions for the game. One of the other encounter sets was for the Agents of Hastur, and so now, with the Path to Carcosa, a Hastur-focused cycle, it does look like that speculation may be holding true. FFG has already made quite a bit of use of Hastur and the King in Yellow and the other games in the Arkham Files line. He's one of the ancient ones included in the base sets of both the Arkham Horror board game and the Elder Sign dice game. He's also received dedicated expansions for both the Arkham Horror and Eldritch Horror board games. In Arkham Horror, there was a small box expansion in 2007 called the King in Yellow, which, like Path to Carcosa, centered around a performance of the King in Yellow coming to Arkham. One of the mechanics it introduced was Blight cards, which represented influential citizens of Arkham being driven insane by the play. Then in 2016, there was a small box expansion for Eldritch Horror titled Signs of Carcosa, which brought the Hastur Ancient One to that game. That expansion, too, featured a mechanic to represent Blight, with Blight conditions that drove your allies mad. I haven't looked at the encounter cards in Path to Carcosa yet, but it seems like there's a good chance something along the lines of Blight could appear, if not in the deluxe, then maybe somewhere later in the cycle, so maybe keep a close eye on your allies. We can already see from the cards in the Agents of Hastur encounter set that you also have your own investigator sanity to worry about. While I was researching these expansions, I came across a piece of flavor text that I did want to share. This is from Finding the Way, a mystery card in Signs of Carcosa for Eldritch Horror. It is said that hidden paths exist from the human world to Carcosa. Paintings and carvings of the Lost City can, over time, provide a means of passage between the two worlds, if one can survive the crossing. That seems to give a pretty good hint as to how our investigators might be able to find a path to Carcosa when the time comes. If you happen to own either the King in Yellow for Arkham Horror or Signs of Carcosa, then right now might be a great time to break one of those expansions out, just as a sort of dress rehearsal for the Carcosa cycle. Looking beyond the Arkham games, if you want to familiarize yourself with the fiction behind the King in Yellow in preparation for the cycle, I have a few things to point you to, and I'll put links for these down below in the video description. First of all, there's the King in Yellow short story collection itself by Robert W. Chambers, specifically the 4 stories, The Repairer of Reputations, The Mask, In the Court of the Dragon, and The Yellow Sign. This collection is in the public domain, and it's pretty easy to find online, including on Wikisource. There are also audio performances out there. The YouTube channel Horror Babble has a reading that I kind of liked. They also have readings of a lot of other stories that would be of interest to Arkham fans, including the Dunwich Horror. I'm also currently in the middle of reading a graphic novel adaptation of The King in Yellow. This is by I.N.J. Culbert from the publisher Self-Made Hero. I picked up my copy from Amazon. It covers just the 4 stories from The King in Yellow that I mentioned, the ones that deal with the King in Yellow text. It's well executed, but I suspect it works best if you're already familiar with those short stories. It's probably not ideal if it's your first exposure to them, but if you've read The King in Yellow before and you want to see it in a new way, I think it's worth a look. For all this talk about The King in Yellow, I think it's worth mentioning that Arkham's focus on the performance of the King in Yellow play itself and on Hastur as the cosmic entity behind it is quite different from what you'll find in the Chambers stories. Chambers stories predate the transformation of Hastur into a mythos deity, and while in the stories the text of the King in Yellow does have a maddening effect on those who read it, it's only the text that the characters encounter and not an actual performance of the play. So while I expect some references to elements of Chambers to pop up here and there in the Carcosa cycle, the link isn't as direct as it was in, say, the Dunwich Legacy, where the Arkham scenarios served basically as a direct sequel to Lovecraft's Dunwich Horror story. I want to give one alternate suggestion, something that more closely follows the Cursed Play storyline, and that's the Hanged King's Tragedy, or SCP-701. This is a short piece from the SCP Foundation, which is a sort of collaborative horror writing project done as a catalog of unnatural phenomenon and containment procedures for them. The Hanged King's Tragedy is the King in Yellow in spirit, if not in name. Your mileage may vary with this one, but it's a quick, creepy read, and the King in Yellow influence is very clear. There's one more that I almost forgot to mention, and that's Fantasy Flight's own Investigators of Arkham book, specifically the story for our King in Yellow actress, Lola Hayes. Although really, you might as well go in there and look at all 5 of the stories for the investigators that are in the Path to Carcosa box. Do note, though, that Safina Rousseau is new and she doesn't have a story in that book. If anyone watching knows of any other stories out there that make good accompaniment to this cycle, I'd love to hear about those in the comments. We've touched on the lore, and now I do want to wrap up by talking about just a few player cards. At this point, all of the player cards from the Path to Carcosa Deluxe box are known. They're up on ArkhamDB if you're curious. I'm not one to proxy cards, and as I said, I don't yet have Carcosa myself, so I haven't yet tried out any of the new cards. I want to do that before I do my full player card rundown, so that video will come later. To close out this video, though, I'm going to talk about just the 3 cards from the Path to Carcosa cycle that I'm most excited to get my hands on. I'm limiting myself to officially previewed cards here, but I'm considering previewed cards from the first 2 Mythos packs as fair game. Here we go. My number 3 most anticipated card does come from one of the Mythos packs. Give a friendly wave to Charles Ross, Esquire. This is a 2-resource seeker ally who comes from Mythos pack number 2, the Unspeakable Oath, and he features a new trait, the Patron trait. He was previewed alongside a second patron from the Rogue class, and it looks like we may get 1 for each class, so I'm looking forward to seeing the others. Charles Ross has 2 abilities. The first lets you spend your resources to pay for item assets that are played by other investigators at your location. The second lets you exhaust him as a fast action to reduce the cost of the next item asset played at your location by 1. This card has really got the deck building gears in my head turning right now, and I'm looking forward to trying to build around him. I'm thinking of some kind of item-focused pairing of Rex Murphy and either Jenny or the new survivor William. Something along the lines of Jenny taking Charles Ross, Rex taking Scavenging, and Joey Vigil, the criminal ally who lets you play items as fast actions for 1 extra resource. Rex could play a fast Disc of Izomna with Jenny helping to pay, Charles basically canceling out Joey's cost, plus giving access to Jenny's big resource pool. Then when it's used to nuke an enemy, Rex can easily scavenge the disc back and then replay it at fast speed. So doing that, he might be able to keep Izomna running for a good part of the game. He could also recur Strange Solution, Acidic Ichor as well, and Jenny could be built a little item heavy to get the most out of it. Or with William Yorick, Yorick already seems to want to run a lot of items, so you could run Charles Ross under Rex just to help Yorick pay for all the items that he's replaying from his discard pile. I don't know if any of what I'm describing is any good, but I'm definitely interested in seeing how these might play out, and if I get a chance to try either of these pairings, then I'll try and report back on it when I do the player card rundown for the Unspeakable Oath. Number 2 is Let Me Handle This. This is a Guardian card from the Carcosa Deluxe box. It's a 0-resource event that you play when another investigator draws a non-peril encounter card. When you play it, you draw that encounter card instead of them, and you get +2 to each of your skills while you're resolving its revelation effect. This is a really nice trick for the Guardians to have, especially for 0 resources. Guardians are all about keeping their teammates safe, and this gives them a brand new way to do that. I especially like that this can be used to change who draws an enemy. Makes it a little easier to split up and go to separate locations. You don't have to worry about a clue-gathering investigator drawing an enemy when they're off on their own. Even if you're at the same location when the enemy's drawn, it might still keep you from having to spend an action to engage that enemy, sort of like the Taunt card. I expect this is going to be really versatile and easy to get utility out of, so I'm definitely looking forward to trying this one out. It also gets me 1 step closer to completing my Everything's in Quotation Marks theme deck. That's Let Me Handle This. And finally, my number 1 most anticipated card is Sleight of Hand. This is a rogue card from the Deluxe box again. It's an event that costs 1 resource, it's fast and has to be played during your own turn. It lets you put an item asset from your hand into play, and then at the end of your turn, if that item's still in play, it gets returned to your hand. This is my favorite of all the officially spoiled cards for Carcosa. Last cycle, the survivors got a card, Chance Encounter, that let them play an ally from the discard pile for a single turn. I love sneak attack style cards like that, but I didn't feel like there was a really excellent target for Chance Encounter when it first came out. It also wasn't fast. Sleight of Hand is in that same vein, but it's fast, and right out of the gate, I feel like we already have great targets to use it on. I can't wait for Zoe to be able to pop a shotgun or a lightning gun for cheap into play with Sleight of Hand, spend a turn just blowing through the ammo, destroying enemies, and then after all that, it goes back into her hand so you can replay it normally with another full load of ammo on a later turn. If this is half as exciting in play as it is in my mind, I'm going to be really happy with this. If you've seen the movie A History of Violence, I'm basically imagining that, but with Zoe Samaras instead of Viggo Mortensen. A couple of cultists walk into Zoe's diner, they start throwing their weight around, then before they understand what's happening, Zoe's reduced them to just a smoking pair of boots. This is definitely going to be one of the first decks that I try out with Carcosa, Sleight of Hand Zoe. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, a little different than what we usually do. Once I have Path to Carcosa in hand, I will be back with my spoiler-free first impressions of its two scenarios, Curtain Call and The Last King. Until then, good luck in your own investigations, and as always, thanks for watching the Atlas Agency.